Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Well, hello folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. Been a week since we last spoke. I hope you and yours are keeping well and everything's fine. The weather's maybe improving a wee bit, the nights are getting a bit longer. But still things go on in the world of politics. And we're here to look at them through a Scottish prism, of course. And I'm joined by my three compadres, the wonderful Yvonne Ridley from down there on the borders, from Florida.
Evening.
Well, evening, Yvonne. Lovely to see you as always.
Thank you.
From Florida, we've got the old Paisley Mohawk himself up there in Florida. Iain, how are you, my friend?
Very well, enjoying the sunshine.
Good. We missed you last week, but great to have you back. I hope you won your golf match after taking a week off.
I'm playing in a tournament this Sunday, but we'll have to see how we can go on.
I'm taking off. We're taking that as a week's holiday. That's sure. You've only got another week to go. And of course, we're joined actually tonight by Phil up there in Kathmandu. Exotic, we're all over the place for you here. Much like our conversations. How are you, Phil? How's Kathmandu? Do we like it?
It's a very interesting place. I found an incredible wee place. Remember the scene out of Indiana Jones where she's out drinking all the guys in the bar? They're drinking a drink called Roxy. And I've had a few of those tonight, so if it all goes awry, it's nothing to do with me. Blame the Roxy and Indiana Jones. Temple of Doom.
Well, great. That's we're off to a flyer. A lot been going on, folks, and I really don't know what to pick out as the biggest highlight. But I suppose we have to start as always, it's still raging on, this horrible war going on in Eastern Europe and the Ukraine. Although there seems to be perhaps seeing a wee bit of light at the end of the tunnel. There is negotiations with Turkey. President Erdogan seems to be trying to be the honest broker because obviously America, UK, the EU cannot be seen as an honest broker in this particular conflict. So Erdogan stepped into the breach, and it seems there seems to be basis. They're saying basis for an agreement, which is Zelensky's agreed that Ukraine will not go into NATO, but as part of the deal, Russia wants the two eastern states of Donbass and Donetsk to be autonomous states. Now, Iain, you know how cynical I am. They, of course, this is a stumbling block. Is it because of the 500 million tons of lithium? Who knows? But
that's where my money is.
Yeah, but we're cynics, Iain. We're cynics. They both want that. But it's good to see that maybe we could start seeing some moves towards peace in the end of this conflict.
Well, to be fair, it was always going to happen. Certainly militarily, Putin's not winning. There's a report out today over here, I don't know if you've seen it in Scotland, but they're estimating about 14,000 Russian dead so far. And, there's hundreds of tanks been knocked out. The Russian military is, mighty as far as nuclear weapons are concerned. But I think we've seen pretty clear evidence they're not much caught in conventional terms, when a country without any air support at all, really, are holding them back. So I would have thought Putin by now must be getting really worried because there's a lot of moves going on over here to even overcome Putin's censorship of the media in Russia, and they're using a lot of stars. Let's say people like, for instance, Schwarzenegger today has, launched a viral video that has been claimed evades a lot of the controls and gets a message out that there is really a war going on. And I think that was quite credible, that young woman who interrupted the news bulletin. That took enormous courage to do because, she's only been fined over £200 so far. She's likely facing a pretty serious jail sentence at the time. But the Russians and the Ukrainians need to come to, a method of solving this. And I think it will despite all the attacks on me earlier on this month, I think it'll end up with what I suggested. And that is that Russia will draw from Ukraine and the countries surrounding Russia will remove foreign bases from their countries. And I think that will be the solution at the end of the day. But I mean, Russia has done enormous.
I don't see the Americans climbing down in the surrounding countries, Ian.
Americans aren't going to be involved in this. I know everybody seems to think the Americans are running this. The Americans aren't running this. It's the Ukrainians and the Russians that are at the peace talks. The Americans aren't going to be there.
You said the solution will be there'll be no foreign troops in any of these other countries. Well, the foreign troops are Americans.
Exactly. Well, the other countries will have to agree. It'll be up to them to agree.
Well, telling America is not an easy task.
I accept that, but I mean, these countries are desperate to help the Ukrainians, so there's a lot of pressure on them as well. And I mean, India understands modern warfare. It's not; they don't need to have these weapons next door. You can have these weapons a level back. Instead of being in Ukraine, they can be in Poland. You know, because Poland's not sharing. I don't think it shares a border with Russia. It might, if it does.
It shares a border with Ukraine.
Yeah, with Ukraine, but Ukraine's not Russia. You know, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania would all have to probably step back a bit in terms of that. But I mean, as long as there's air cover, which NATO can provide from the countries next door, it's irrelevant. Absolutely irrelevant.
Well, Yvonne, obviously we all want to see peace breaking out, but I'm not so sure it's so close. I mean, we had Boris this week touring the Middle East, looking for oil. He went to Saudi the same week when they beheaded 83 people. He kept his head. Looking for oil, of course. You know, principals go out there looking for oil. They've paid the 400 million quid that they should have paid years ago to Iran to get them back on tap for oil because the Russian oil's dried up. It's kind of dirty, isn't it? Kind of sleazy and just not nice.
Well, the hypocrisy and double standards are there for all to see. And, you know, you mentioned about the people who were executed in Saudi, the highest number that's been executed in many years. And the majority of those who were killed were from the minority Shia sect. Yeah. And of course, because of the way that Saudi operates, it's a very secretive regime. So we'll never know if those people ever even got to a trial, were ever charged with anything, were, you know, it's obscene. And as you say, there was the British Prime Minister going cap in hand, looking for oil. At the same time, we had the US president calling Putin a war criminal because Russia had bombed schools, hospitals, and other civilian areas. But, you know, I remember a friend from Medicine Sans Frontier telling me about how the Americans bombed hospitals in Afghanistan. And I've been there, and I know that the Americans also bombed schools and other civilian areas. So basically, you've got war criminals calling war criminals war criminals. The biggest shame in all of this is the pathetic state of the United Nations, which is no longer fit for purpose. It was set up with the noblest aims after the Second World War, and now it has a Security Council where they've all got blood on their hands. You know, there isn't a clean party in all of this, and this is the way that the world has descended. And this isn't whataboutery at all. This is a race to the gutter by all of the superpowers, and it will continue to descend into the gutter until we can somehow repair or fix or restore a broken system where nobody is, all these countries, they've all behaved in a criminal way, and they will not be held to account. We know we're not going to see Putin in the International Criminal Court, a court which is had 3 or 4 convictions of African leaders. That's another thing that's not fit for purpose, and America and China, refuse to sign up to it. So what is the point?
No, agreed.
It's a fruitless exercise, and as long as it's just seen to be persecuting leaders from the African continent, then you have to wonder. I think that we have to dismantle everything and start again, because, as I say, the UN isn't fit for purpose, and nobody is without a stain in all of this.
No, the thing is, Phil, if Boris had been in Moscow or Beijing, and the Russians or the Chinese had beheaded 83 people, you can imagine the outcry. But because it's Saudi, they've got plenty of money and plenty of oil, and they supply the West, and they do the West bidding. They don't attack Israel. They're okay. We'll not say anything. It's as Yvonne says, it's shameful.
It is, and it is about oil. It's also about the military-industrial complex. That's why America wages war, and I don't say the American people. I mean the people that control America. And when you look at what's happening, I build pipelines and oil and gas facilities all around the world, and the alternatives to the Russian feed to Europe are growing quite deliberately, because America doesn't want. They want to control. They want to control the money. That's what it's all about. But I think one of the things I should say. I should thank our Fox News correspondent Iain for his earlier report on the position
you see the difference, Phil. I was talking about what's happening in Iran, not everywhere else. I agree with Yvonne in what she said, but I hear from you all everything about everywhere else in the world, but nothing about the poor Ukrainian people who are getting bombed with Russian bombs, ordered by the Russian president, delivered by Russian tanks. That's what matters to me, and that's happening now. So
100%, Iain.
This, I'll agree with you about what America does. I don't think Americans saintly, but what I know is Russia is evil, and they need dealt with now. And that's not Fox News, by the way. That's CNN.
No, that's reality. That is reality. But the picture that's painted here is that Russians are the problem, when in fact it's the state that is the issue in every time.
I agree totally with that.
And the Americans are exactly the same. The Americans, I mean, if people, when I was in politics, people used to ask me, what is the best summation of politics? How could you articulate it? I says, well, talk to somebody that knows a lot more about it than me. And I refer them, if you don't mind the swearing, to George Carlin's answer, which is the American dream. Now, if anybody wants to watch that, check out George Carlin, the political satirist who was a genius. And he's the punchline, I don't want to spoil it for anyone, is the American dream's what it's all about, because you've got to be asleep to believe it. And the game that is happening here is the military-industrial complex, oil and gas, big pharma. We're all being played by the powers that be. And you don't need a conspiracy. You don't need to be a conspiracy theorist. You just need to understand that for the powers that be to continue to be in power, they just have to act in their own interest. And there's a confluence of their own interest. When it keeps people down, it keeps people at war. I mean, you look at what's happened in Donbass, Luhansk and Donetsk, and it's Russia, as many of us anticipated. Russia doesn't want all of Ukraine because it can't hold it. It can't afford to hold it. It's physically impossible to do it. What it's prioritizing are the Russian-speaking regions. Now, whether or not it's a coincidence that it happens to have huge facilities and huge resources,
that's exactly what it's about.
Yeah, I'm with you there. But Russia, bear in mind, 40% of its GDP is oil and gas. So it already relies on that, and it doesn't want the Americans to destroy it. And that's what America's trying to do. And this is why, when I talked about it before, I think the solution is not what you suggested, Iain, but more about awakening. As George Carlin said, let the people wake up, let the people rise, let them understand what their government is doing at their behest, because the US citizens need to get going. They need to understand that they're being played big time, just as we in Britain, just as Europeans are. And, the reason the UN isn't working is because of the veto system. One vote and it's kiboshed.
That's right.
And
Russia's got one, China's got one, Britain's
got
one.
And if you use it, forget it. So if you're a player, it can't work. And the last point I would make is something I genuinely believe in, a force for good. I mean, and I don't believe in white cowboy hats and black cowboy hats, as we've spoken before, but I do believe in a European army, and I don't think America belong in a peacekeeping force, given their history, recent history, post-Second World War. I think somebody mentioned earlier on, we were talking about the demise of Britain as a power, and that really happened. Britain and France, when the Suez Crisis happened, and America told you, get out of there, or we'll call in the debts on the Marshall Plan. Truman, we'll call in the debt.
I think this war is actually helping bring that about. I think it's much more likely now there'll be a European defence force.
I hope so.
I mean, the other reason for that is that America's attention is moving away from Europe and very much towards China. And,
as it should.
I think it's quite likely they'll be spending a lot more money in Japan, South Korea, various countries.
India with a huge army and a nuclear.
I think it's far more likely that will happen anyway, and it makes sense. But the other reason why I think it will happen is the very, very poor performance of the Russian conventional forces. I think up until now, people, probably most of Europe, thought Russia was capable of overrunning them in conventional terms. I think they're seeing displayed very clearly that Russia is in no position to be able to overrun the whole of Europe in conventional terms, which I think will encourage them to say, well, we perhaps don't need to have such a close alliance with America and reliance on America. We should be doing it ourselves. And I think that could well happen. But there's a lot of problems there, obviously, as well, because of alignments, all the rest, and, getting the military systems all compare with each other. But, I mean, change is coming out of this. It may be good or it may be bad. But the most important thing is it's got to stop now, because innocent men, women and children are getting absolutely hammered by this. And the only person that can stop that part of it is Russia.
Here's hoping that President Erdogan manages to negotiate a peace. Let's hope that happens sooner or later. The last thing on the foreign, we're talking about sanctions that are going on. And one of the sanctions is in Afghanistan, where we hear that they're on the verge of a massive humanitarian crisis, hunger and starvation, because of the sanctions that have been put on them, which seem to be a wee bit, it's to get at the Taliban. And what it's doing, just the same as the innocents in this conflict in Ukraine, it's the innocents in Afghanistan, the children and the non-combatants, not the Taliban, because they're going to get fed, they're not going to go hungry, but it's the ordinary citizens. And it really, you wish there was something, Yvonne, in the UN or someone that could just say, look, come on, let's find another way of doing this, rather than starving women, children and civilians.
Well, this is, again, it's down to America. America has stolen billions of dollars that belong to the Afghan banks. And they've just taken it. Now, again, it's who is policing these countries? America is a law unto itself. I agree with Phil when he said that there's no room for America in a peacekeeping force. And the reality is, I can go further back than the Second World War. America, since 1892, has been at war every single year until the present day, either at home, internally, with Mexico, with its neighbours, or elsewhere in the world. And in the last 50 years, it has bombed or attacked or invaded or done all three to more than 40 different countries. This is not a peaceful nation. It doesn't understand the word peace.
I'm getting worried here, Yvonne. I think this is a lead up to you saying that President Trump was an enormous success because he never went to war with him for 5 years. Very worried about you, Yvonne. That's no like you. Didn't see that coming.
Well, you're saying that, but the Americans just pulled out of Afghanistan in 2021. So they were in occupation, and it's the countries in the West have to abide by international law as well. We've just seen the return from Iran of Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe. Why was she taken? Because Britain owed £400 million to Tehran. And has done.
Listen, Yvonne, we don't need to go abroad to find these rogues. Tony Blair, he's as guilty as anybody. If you want to talk about a war criminal, you look firstly at Tony Blair. He was the man that had the dodgy dossier that told us everyone. He told the Americans lies, and the Americans claimed to have believed him. He told everybody lies, and that war in Iraq, he should be facing a trial for that because he was very much the man behind it.
I think that's what we're saying. There's numerous people. All of them, you couldn't get a flag paper between all these different tyrants, whether they be capitalist, communist, or in between.
Guantanamo Bay is still open, where people are being held without trial, without charge, and have been for more than 20 years. If you think about what you have done or achieved, or your family has done or achieved in the last 20 years, and then just obliterate that because, that's what it's been like for those men in Guantanamo who've had 20 years of their life removed.
No one should ever be in prison without a proper trial. There's no
exactly.
There's no question of that.
But that is the fundamental basics of law. And if America is not going to abide by international law, then why should Putin care whether he's bombing a school or a hospital?
But don't make
America has done the same.
I think there's a difference between putting some people in jail without trial, which I completely and utterly condemn, and the murder, absolute blatant murder of hundreds of civilians in a war situation. I can never put the two of them together. I condemn both, but they're on a different scale altogether, as far as I'm concerned.
On the war, one thing, bringing it a bit home, we discussed it last week or the week before, but Nicola Sturgeon saying that, she wanted to see a no-fly zone, it shouldn't be taken off. And there was outrage saying, are you trying to start Third World War, love? I mean, don't be so silly. You know what it entails. Now, she got an awful lot of blowback in that, and she must have. But instead of accepting it and keeping her head down, she came out this week and insinuated all that she'd got was because she was a woman. It was misogyny.
I know, I saw that.
And you think, Iain, come on, love, why not just shut up? Accept it. It's as if she can't accept being wrong on anything.
It's part of the lot of, particularly, I think, a woman in politics, that you get patronised by men. A lot of the time I've probably been patronised by better men than Alistair Jack along the way, to be perfectly honest.
I thought she would have offered them the GRA Grenadiers to get into the front line.
I tell you what is misogyny. Misogyny is supporting trans women entering into swimming competitions.
I'm coming to that. Don't jump the gun here. Don't jump the gun.
Yeah.
Don't jump the gun.
I've got a result. One woman came second.
It really has
yesterday.
my dander up, seeing.
I've got it here for Yvonne. It was my big end for you. I was going to just, that was going to be your big finale. I was throwing that one in and then just going to say, right, guys, let's go. We'll leave the camera.
Sorry if I've too soon, but I was
I was just watching the news over here and finding out that the guy stroke woman had come second in the competition. Over here, it's top of the news over here. Big story.
I'm going to come on to it, but the other thing, I was just going to say that, some good news out of this, good if it's good news or bad news, but these children now are coming to Scotland from Dnipro. But I want to say this is very difficult for me as a big Rangers man. I'm going to have to pay some compliments here to the Hibs fans, which is not something I thought I would ever do in my lifetime, Iain. But
I think they deserve it. It's wonderful.
Absolutely. It's a charity by Hibs football fans who've been working in Ukraine prior to the war. They've been working over there and doing things. And it's them who have actually managed to get these kids, I believe, into Poland. And they're now going to be coming over to Scotland. I just hope they don't take them to Easter Road, because that would take them out of one war's road. Put them in Easter Road would be cruel.
No, but there's genuinely a tradition in Scottish football fans to do that type of thing.
Yeah,
they travel everywhere with the Tartan Army. And they've got their own charity, the Sunshine Fund. And they do tremendous work. And there's a pub in Maryhill in Glasgow. I'll just tell you this very quickly. And there's two brothers, they're skinheads, and they wear the CU Jimmy hats. And if Scotland's playing a poor country and they're going to the game, they collect money up and they buy loads and loads of marathon bars and Mars bars, all the rest of it. And they pay the baggage to take a few extra suitcases with them. And when they arrive at the airport in the poorer country, they get the taxi driver and they ask them to take them to the nearest school. And they go to the nearest school, they see the head teacher, they explain they're from Scotland, they're here for the football, and they want to distribute all these sweets to all the children in the school. But they then tell them there's a catch. We've got to get them all out, and they've all got to hold their sweeties up, and we've got to sit in the middle with our photograph so that we can take the photograph back and prove to everyone we spent their money the way we said we did. So there's this pub in Maryhill in Glasgow that's covered in all these pictures from all over the world. And these two wee guys. And there's lots of people like that in the army.
The way things are going, we'll soon be waiting for foreigners coming to Scotland with bags of sweeties. The way the cost of living's going up, I tell you, it's getting bad. But we want to be super sponsors, Wales and Scotland, and maybe the Home Secretary. It's disgusting that Scotland and Wales have got to ask the English Home Secretary who can come into our country and who can stay. But I wish these kids well, and congratulations to the Hibs fans. Well done. It's nice.
Well, it's nice to read about Scottish football fans doing great things, because I think Rangers fans in Belgrade have been behaving quite badly, singing sectarian songs.
Roddy, if you can just hang on.
Yvonne's got to leave. Becky, if you could just fade her out now. The night before, I actually heard, I could never just, it was one of these just stop going, I can't go, these sectarian songs, or the God Save the Queen stuff. But, I went to my first game when I was 4. But I believe apparently the night before in their hotels, a lot of these Serbians were coming in and just attacking them when people were sitting in the bar having a drink. So,
I've got another
I'm
funny
not justifying anything they've done whatsoever.
I've got another funny. One of my best pals, he used to say to me, "What's this about defending the dairy?" I said, "Sorry, what do you mean? What's this about the milk?" And he says, "Oh, he thought save the dairy wolves." was defending the dairy and the milk.
The milk factory.
Back you mentioned that Leah Thomas, who I just say is a cheat. And what I was saying, Yvonne, on this woman, man, he, she, I don't know what you say. It's a man. I mean, he's got his genitals. He's not had any surgery. That he's still got his chromosomes. It's cheating. But I put out a tweet today when I said, well, I think that the International Olympic Committee, FIFA, UEFA, the UCI cycling, all sporting bodies should say, use whatever drugs you like, get any enhancing drugs you like, because if you can use chromosomes to cheat, why shouldn't you just be allowed to use drugs that will make you better? We're now condoning cheating, because at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's cheating. There's no way any girl in the world, I mean, I looked at it, I think I've got it. He was 436th top male swimmer in the world. He's now the top woman swimmer. It's cheating, Yvonne. There's nothing else for it, is there?
Well, I think that what we need to see is some solidarity from the female swimmers who should refuse to swim or refuse to compete in a competition where, these transgender swimmers are.
You're here.
Because they've got to make a stand. And now coming first has been so devalued that the focus is now on who comes second, third and fourth, because everybody knows that the man in the swimming suit is going to come in first. And it is...
But there is a problem, if I could just, sorry to interrupt you, Yvonne, but there is a problem here, and it goes back to another social problem in the United States of America. The problem is a lot of these girls, and in the sports in general in America, as you'll know, Iain, they're there in sports scholarships because they can't afford a proper education, so they get it in a sports scholarship. And if they refuse to compete, they'll lose their scholarship, they'll lose their sponsorship, so they lose their education. So it really is difficult. What's got to happen is that there's got to be, I don't know, some kind of crowdfunding or something that says, you lose your scholarship, or nations that are willing to help and say, well, we'll educate you here, we'll bring you to Scotland and put you through one of our universities, which are probably better than the American ones you're at anyway. But that's the problem they've got about making a stance.
Well, they've got to make a stand, and you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs. So if they have to sacrifice things, all the women's movements, all the major breakthroughs that they've made have come at great personal sacrifice. And the female swimmers, if they all collectively said, that's it, we're not going in the pool and going into these unfair competitions, then it would change. And
it would change quite quickly, Yvonne, because if the firing gun goes and there's only one swimmer diving in the pool, it's no longer a race.
Correct, and he's going to feel like an idiot when he gets to the end. Look, guys, we're overshooting as usual, as always, and I've got to speak to Sara shortly. A couple of things I'd like to go on, and one of the big ones we've got to mention is the P&O Ferries. The disgraceful way 800 British seafarers were sacked. And what transpires is that the French, the Dutch, who are employed by P&O Ferries weren't sacked because they're covered by European law. Yep. This is a Brexit dividend for the British. They lost their jobs. No, they got no money in lieu, no redundancy, nothing. Just go. Singapore without the sun.
Yeah.
Yes, it's another Brexit bonus. It's another wake-up call for Scotland to get the hell out of this union, because this is the way it's going. I mean, what you're seeing here is just another destruction of workers' rights, of human rights, and it will continue. It will continue apace until such times as we remove ourselves from this vacuous situation where you no longer have the right to stand up as a human being. It's all been undermined. So there's no surprise to me that the French, the Dutch, the Europeans are standing up for their people, and Britain, this allegedly Great Britain, doesn't. It was
like an American shooting, Iain. The British government are offering thoughts and prayers.
Well, I've just tweeted that I think passengers and goods vehicles wanting to use that service should be allowed to board in Dubai. Because I don't think we should be using that company. If that company comes back with agency workers, it should be a complete 100% boycott.
Well, there's other things. If I just say, Yvonne, again, Boris Johnson was in Dubai and sat with the Sheikh. Now, there was £147 million black hole in the P&O pension fund, and they said, "Well, we can't make that up." But they then spent £146 million on a golf tournament out of Dubai. Iain's right. We should be stopping them getting into ports. We shouldn't allow them. We should withdraw ferry routes off them.
The Tory government should immediately revoke licences and the ability for P&O ferries to dock in every single UK port. We saw that in the end, how fast they moved against the Russian oligarchs once they finally did move. And so it's not inconceivable that they can do this to P&O ferries.
And it would be totally justified.
And it would also get universal support from the vast majority of the British people, Iain.
Yeah,
I think so.
I don't think there's any doubt.
Yeah. But on the last note, there's just one last note before we go, folks, and I go into the second part, is as we're getting nearer the election, and I'll give this to you, if I may, to start all off, Yvonne. The Tories deployed one of their favourite, if you support Scottish independence, they're all Anglophobes. And as I said, there's no such thing as a British nationalist. That doesn't exist. They're patriots, and there's no Irish phobia, Scotophobia, or Welsh phobia. Just Anglophobia. It's just a load of nonsense, and it's a dirty trick, Yvonne, isn't it?
Oh, and absolutely. I was born on the wrong side of the border. I was able to rectify that, but I don't look over at the English and see them as the enemy. In fact, if anything, I feel quite sorry for them, and there's a lot of solidarity between the Scots and the English and the Welsh and the Irish. The problem I think that we all have is with the boss class, the ruling class in Westminster, and that is the problem. And that has always been the problem for ordinary working class people.
Yeah, it's the colonialist mentality. They can't ever be doing any wrong. It's just those that they're persecuting that have all these complex problems.
Yeah, and when they're calling us jocks and taffies and paddies, and it's just banter. The same way that they banter about the French, the Germans, Catholics, Muslims, brown people, black people. It's just banter. Everyone else is a dirty nationalist. Gentlemen, lady, my friends, see how the time flies when you're having a good old rant and a rave. It's great. Thank you very much for your time, your input, and everything else. And if you're hanging about, I'll see you later. If not, I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Ciao. Cheers, Roddy.
Okay. Bye.
Yeah, folks, it was good. Some heat on the fire there. I hope you enjoyed that. Hope it helped. I hope it gave you some questions to some things you've been asking. I'm now delighted to say I'm joined by Sara Salyers. Now, Iain, as you probably know, with his Sara, good evening. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
I'm exceptionally well. Sara has had a series of articles in Iain's blog, Years for Scotland, on the claim of right. And they've been well received, and it's something I'd like to talk with you, if I may, Sarah, just to simplify it down for our audience. And me, because I'm not the brightest, I need things simple. Now, you were talking about how we have in the UK this sort of thing. It's a Westminster sovereign, and it's parliamentary sovereign, and you question that for the Scottish nation. Would that be a fair assumption?
I would say challenge. Not. I don't question it. I object strenuously to the claim. Parliamentary sovereignty. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so I have to go to what the law schools and the books on law and the orthodoxy that's being taught in law schools is. And what that says is that in 1689, the UK Parliament took sovereignty, took what had been the sovereignty of the monarch, and that now became UK parliamentary sovereignty. I've quoted it in the booklet. So problem there. You notice the problem about UK parliamentary sovereignty in 1689.
Yeah. So you've got popular sovereignty and you've got parliamentary sovereignty.
Parliamentary sovereignty says. So there was no UK Parliament in 1689. It was the English Parliament. The English Parliament, during what they called the Glorious Revolution, were deposing James the Seventh of Scotland and second, I think, of England, and replacing him with William and Mary. And they passed the Bill of Rights, and that at that same time brought in this notion that Parliament would be sovereign. And that meant it was the final authority in the land, could make or unmake any law, blah, 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 blah. In the exact same year that happened, Scotland had its claim of right, and that was passed by something called the Revolutionary Convention. The Convention of the Estates, I won't go into it here, but it was not Parliament. It was a separate body, and it could be convened when there wasn't a legitimate Parliament. There were elections to it. They were pretty heated. There was accusations of cheating. But what it did was it asserted, in order to depose this king, they couldn't say he had abdicated, which is what they did in England, because he hadn't been in Scotland. He'd been ruling from England. So when he went,
should say, Sarah, now the claim of right was before the Union of Parliaments.
So 1689 is the claim of right. 1707 in Scotland is the Union of Parliament. So 18 years earlier, this has happened. The king has left. He's fled for his life. Nothing is unanimous in any country, but there's this huge upheaval. England is wanting to offer the throne of England to William. Scotland hasn't been consulted. There's a hoo-ha about that. And then they what had been the Privy Council, you can't have a parliament with no king, because even to today, the monarch's got to call a parliament. So they summoned, the Privy Council and the Kirk asked the Convention of the Estates to convene. They had elections up and down the length and breadth of Scotland, and it was very heated, and then they came together, and what they did was they produced a document called the Claim of Right, and they listed the things which James VII had done, which are against the law in Scotland, and they pointed out that in Scotland, government is limited, legal limited monarchy, and that means government, and that the king couldn't do whatever he wanted. He couldn't decide, and his government couldn't do anything they wanted. They couldn't decide to get rid of these laws or those laws. They couldn't violate civil rights and liberties without forfeiting their right to govern. And that by having done this, having claimed that he was absolute, which is what Westminster claims, by having struck down civil rights, and by having done things like, letting your pals off your taxes, giving money to people without parliamentary oversight, using the law to go after your political opponents, trying to restrict the right to protest. This government of the king had violated Scotland's constitution by infringing these permanent rights that the Scottish people have. And that by doing so, he had forfeited the right to govern. And that the calling of the convention, the sitting of the convention, echoed Scotland's tradition of the people coming together, full and free expression of the nation. to restore its own rights, as they have done in times past. That is a core constitutional document. It wasn't passed by Parliament, then that's important. And it's a core document still in the UK.
And is it still relevant?
Well, we've one of the things that happened when the treaty was being negotiated is that there was considerable concern in Scotland about the fact that the constitutional positions were so different. In Scotland, the people were in charge. So if you can sack your government simply by calling convention and saying you've broken these laws, you're out. You're sovereign. If you can't do that, and there is no mechanism to do that with the English Parliament or now with the Westminster Parliament, then the Parliament is sovereign. And that is, as the High Court has said, the central characteristic of Westminster. It is sovereign.
The English High Court, not the Scottish High Court.
No, it was the English High Court that said this. The Supreme Court has been quite bashful about actually coming out and saying that, because, see, these two constitutions were never going to gel. They were never going to mesh. How can they? They're opposing. So what the Scots did was they got a guarantee, and it was never going to work, but they got a guarantee that in Scotland their constitution wouldn't be changed, that the people would still be able to keep their laws. They were in charge. The government would be accountable to the people by having and their religion, which was, let's be honest, it was right at the front of their concerns, Presbyterianism. And this was all to be preserved by inserting the 1706 Act, the Preservation of the Presbyterian Faith, I think it was called. But highlighted in that body of legislation was the claim of right. And this was inserted to be ratified as a condition prior, of union and of the treaty. A condition of the union and the treaty is that the parliaments would ratify Scotland's claim of right. And what's got lost is that, look at Magna Carta, and it's full of dross. It's full of stuff. There's one section that talks about whether, when somebody dies, if he owes money to a Jew, the estate doesn't have to honour that debt. I mean, it's lovely. Anti-Semitic ghastliness, and then details about what the nobles can and can't do. But Magna Carta is held up, internationally as this amazing democratic step, which said that kings could be held accountable, and they weren't. They didn't have unlimited authority. Scotland already had that before ever Magna Carta came along, and nobody looks at that and says, "Oh, let's not bother with Magna Carta because it talks about all this other stuff that's completely anachronistic." Bill of Rights. There's lots of stuff in there.
Yeah, but of course, recently, I just say, some people say, "Oh, this is out of date. Claim of rights not applicable." Theresa May was talking about Henry VIII powers, which of course she was using, which was before the union of the crowns, never mind the union of the parliaments.
Absolutely.
And goose and gander would be my...
Not half. Bill of Rights, same year as the claim of right. And boy, are they proud of that. And this is where we get parliamentary sovereignty from. But we're just going to...
There's two things you mentioned in your articles. One was that Scotland had two assemblies, the Convention of the Estates, and they used to have a salvo at the end of every session. That was that sort of agreeing with what had happened? They were happy to keep going. No. Salvo.
No, Scotland had a number of assemblies actually. So the Parliament was referred to as the Three Estates. Right. Then there was a sister body known as the Convention of the Estates, about which very little was known until recently. It still tends to be lumped in with the Parliament. It was not the Parliament. There was also a borough convention, which was extremely powerful and got legislation pushed through, and that, believe it or not, existed until 1906. But what the Parliament had to do was acknowledge that the people were sovereign at the end of every session. So what they did was from 1592, they offered salvo, which is short for salvo jure cuius libet, except for the right of whoever. And anybody, any individual or group could stand up and say that legislation that the Parliament and the Crown being the same thing that you're proposing to put into place here, you can't do that. That violates my rights or these people's rights. So salvo was offered at the end of every parliamentary session. And if there were an objection made, that whatever was being proposed violated civil rights or civil liberties, then it could be referred to the Court of Session. And it was made statutory in, I think it was 1663. So it became an act of the Scottish Parliament. But by law, this had to be offered. Can you imagine that today?
So nowadays, how can we have to challenge this? Surely would you say that we have to challenge this in a court and take it to the Court of Session? Why should we take it to the Supreme Court?
I wouldn't. No, I would.
I would say take it to the Court of Session and use it.
Why? The Court of Session doesn't. No court has the right to make a constitution. No court.
Well, where do we take it? What do we do with it to use it to our benefit?
See, I hoped you'd ask that.
Yeah.
What we're doing over and over again is who's going to do this for us? What court is going to tell us that we're entitled to do this? What politician, what party, what act can we get passed that tells us? The Convention of the Estates didn't require an act to do that. It convened the communities of Scotland. It's not impossible to do that. We can look back to the last, the Constitutional Convention and the Claim of Right in 1989 and how people came together for that. All we need to do is look at it and what it says. So the Claim of Right's in two parts. That's what it did, and some of it's pretty murky and sectarian. You know, it's very anti-Catholic and oppressive. But the grounds it's doing it on are constitutional grounds. Here's the legal grounds we're going to do this on, and they've belonged to Scotland for a long, long time, and we can prove that.
It's just who do we prove it to?
To our people. So here's what I'm saying: we want to go and prove it to? Please, sir, if we prove this to you, will you give us our ball back, i.e., our independence? I think what we need to do is put this out to the people and explain to them. We made a deal. We entered a contract. This was the condition. That condition has been broken. In fact, it's been lied about, misrepresented, distorted. This is your right. And we just do it.
I'll play devil's advocate if I may.
Yeah.
Because in the real world, in real politics, there's no way they're going to accept that.
Who's they?
Because they being our imperial masters who have colonized our country.
Absolutely.
Because we're the money tree that they need. So there's no way they go, yeah, fine, off you go. They're going to demand some kind of legal challenge on all of this. So I'm asking, where would that legal challenge be?
When and if they challenge, but you have to remember, we have a court system in place right now that has jailed a journalist for a crime that didn't exist. Mm-hmm. We have a court that has put another journalist in prison for a crime that wasn't committed in this country, and all he was doing was the job of a journalist. Julian Assange has been in jail for years, and that's our court system. Yeah. We've put him there. So we're talking about, we've got a corrupt court system, we've got a corrupt political system, we've got a system that's not fit for purpose. So when we say, okay, well, who do we go to? Just bear in mind, they're not going to let us go. We're going to have to just go. And the rest of the world is not going to say, now Scotland, you shouldn't have got yourselves together and organised. You shouldn't have created a movement as big as ever the Labour movement and the trade union was. And you shouldn't have told Westminster to pack its bags and get out because you've no right. They're not going to do that. And what's Westminster going to do? Send the army in?
Well, here's the real politics. I mean, we were talking in the earlier part of the show about poor Afghanistan because the Americans have screwed their banking system, so they can't get access to funds, they can't afford to buy food, they can't trade because they've screwed them over. That's wrong, morally wrong, and every other wrong. We've been told that the UK has been told to get out the Chagos Islands. It's illegal. The Americans and British are in there illegally. They're still there.
Yeah.
The real politics says that, you just can't go. It's going to be challenged.
It will be challenged.
Where?
It doesn't matter what we do. They will not let us go. It will be challenged. And at the very least, whatever Westminster decides to do about it, I think there's several stages to this. So let me soften up a bit. I think the first stage is to demand that the Scottish law is respected. You cannot in Scotland curtail the right to peaceful protest. That's illegal. You cannot give money to your pals without parliamentary oversight. You can't do deals behind closed doors. You cannot let some people off their taxes. That's not legal in Scotland. You cannot misuse the law. So, I think we need to start moving together to put in place, and we can take these cases to the Court of Session, or we can add, evidence to cases that are going, to say that under the Scottish Constitution, which is protected as a condition of the Union, take it out, you've lost your Union. These things are not lawful in Scotland. We can challenge the application of an English parliamentary convention in Scotland. As Lord Cooper remarked, it never had any parallel.
Yeah, in 1959 or something. Yeah, Lord Cooper. I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
So we can do all of that, and in the meantime, we can simply go ahead and start putting back together the assemblies of Scotland, where we can begin to discuss these things and look at the terms and I'll tell you what, we need to do it fairly quickly, because there is a constitution being put together that at the moment that makes absolutely no mention of popular sovereignty, and certainly wouldn't have the people holding the politicians in Scotland to account. We've had this in place all this time.
Yeah, well, somebody else said that. Well, why haven't we used it before? Well, here's the fact. It wasn't until 1918 that we had universal suffrage. And prior to that, those who were involved in our governance were quite happy with the status quo. They were doing all right. They were in London. They had their London houses, the blah, 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 and all the money. So it wasn't until then that we've had a voice to do anything.
Yeah.
But I've been shouting for citizens' assemblies for a while now. And a recall of all our members of Parliament, and abstentionism, and calling together a grand, I called it a grand assembly, I called it, before I read your wonderful stuff. And we should declare our independence and say, we went into this Treaty of Union. It's not working for us. It's like a marriage or divorce. Well, it's over. I'm out of here. It's
important to be seen. I think that kind of is what a lot of people are getting at, and maybe you as well, to be seen to be going through. And Scots are very legalistic. They want to know that what they're doing is right and legal, and then we've got a lot milder, and I blame a modern school system that is designed to keep impose conformity rather than encourage the kind of,
to pacify us as well.
Aye, and in the past, Scots have been what my late husband would have called ornery. We questioned authority, and we weren't inclined to just do what we were told. And we need to get that back. There's a lovely. I came across a thing about an act passed by the Scottish Parliament, the Three Estates, which I absolutely love. I'll have to look it out again. But they passed an act, and it must have been in the 17th century, I think, which said that rebellion is only lawful in Scotland if it has been approved by the estates. Now, the estates mean the communities of Scotland. Rebellion is only lawful, which is to say, it's lawful in Scotland if people want it. If the estates have said, yeah, we need to do something about this. And the convention that passed the Claim of Right was known as the Revolutionary Convention. So we've got that tradition, but we've got away from it. And we've started through a system that we've all just taken for granted, an education system that has wiped out our language, our history, our identity, any Scottish civics at all, and kind of created conformity. We've come to accept cap in hand as the way you do politics. The Scots never went cap in hand in their history to anybody, but that's what we do now. Yeah. So what's facing us isn't, we ask this question, how, who, to which court, blah, blah. No, the question is, it is how, but it's not who's going to do this, who's going to give us our ball back. It's how are we going to take back our ball? It's ours. These laws, these rights are ours. The right to hold our parliaments to account and to do something about it if they're corrupt and they break the law and they take away people's rights and they sell our our offshore energy without any comeback for the people, and they, and they sit by while we have kids going hungry in a really wealthy nation, and they let that happen, and they allow Raytheon to go on making all its money and sending weapons to Saudi Arabia so that they can kill 330,000 civilians, and we've got 3 million starving children there right now. Mm-hmm. Thanks, to companies like this that are allowed to trade from Scotland, but that's none of our business, because the good and the great will pat us on the head and tell us that they know what's right for us. That's not the Scottish way. It's not what the Claim of Right says. It's not what was protected as a condition of the Union. But if we're going to take the ball back, we're going to have to do it ourselves. So we've got to start talking about how we do that, not how we persuade this person, that court, or that person. We're going to have to figure out how we're going to do it.
But that's why citizens' assemblies would be a great thing to start.
Yes. Yeah.
And I have been promoting that, and I will continue to promote it. We're coming towards the end, Sarah. Believe it or not, the time flies in when you're having good chats. It just means, the great thing about it is it means I have to get you back again for further chats. Have you been talking to the people of the SSRG group?
I'm a member of the SSRG, yeah.
There you go. They're certainly getting ready to open up assemblies, and it's a good starting point.
Yeah,
Are you in favour of that, obviously?
Oh, absolutely. The thing is, this is how you start doing it. You start putting them in place. I know somebody I'm working with is busy putting a kind of digital version of these assemblies together, which can then convert into physical assemblies. There's a lot of work going on in the background right now, and two things have to happen. We have to make people aware. The power in Scotland is you and me. The late great Willie McRae wrote, and it was a piece by him that put me onto the salvo, which proves that Parliament recognised the people as sovereign. And he talked about popular sovereignty as holographic, that it's in each one of us and all of us collectively. And we've got used to waiting for someone to tell us what we can do or to lead us. But if we each recognise that we're it, and then we're standing up together. I'm it, you're it, we're all it. It's not about leaders and it's not about parties, it's us. We can begin to simply do it. And who's going to stop us?
Well, it doesn't help when the leader of the de facto leader of the independence movement is talking about we need English permission and a Section 30 and gold standard. That's telling the Scottish people that they've got to,
well, she's being
legal.
They do. Holyrood, we've been bamboozled. Holyrood.
It's an extension of Westminster. That's all it is.
It's not the Parliament of Scotland reconvened.
No.
It is, as you say, it's a satellite of Westminster, and as the creation of Westminster, it is answerable to Westminster, and it agreed to the Scotland Act. We that's the act that was passed, and that is the act under which Holyrood operates. But Westminster is answerable, so it's answerable to Westminster, but Westminster is answerable to us in Scotland.
Yeah, the thing is, of course, what people in Scotland really out there need to know is that not even the Prime Minister, but some cabinet member down in England, with a stroke of a pen, Holyrood could be closed.
Yes.
So, with no comeback, with nothing. No legal recourse.
It was created by an act of Westminster. It is under Westminster control. It can only move in the directions that Westminster allows it. There was, of course, one exception. As we all know, the Holyrood Parliament could have taken on matters that were reserved to Westminster if it had managed to get an 80% majority of people who wanted to do that in the election. But no, it was both votes SNP, so we didn't.
Yes, indeed. We were betrayed by our own. And allowed unionists, and absolutely that was our chance last May. The next chance coming up, of course, is going to be 2024. From an electoral point of view, which is the UK general election, but that's another discussion for another day.
Well, I'm an incurable optimist, and so I'm allowing myself to dream that by that time, at least the bones of the assemblies that resemble the old 8 assemblies of the boroughs of Scotland will be back in place, and we will be moving towards a convention that can simply air all these grievances as the Claim of Right Convention, the Revolutionary Convention, did. this is what has been done and this is what is illegal in Scotland, and everybody gets a say and everybody gets to know about it and express themselves. And then it could move to become a convention that says, pack your bags, you're out. That's that, you can dream.
Sarah, I hope you're right. I hope your optimism is proved to be true. Thank you very much for taking some of your time and giving it and sharing it with us today. It's greatly appreciated.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Nice to talk to you.
And to you, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed this edition of Through a Scottish Prism as much as I have, as I always do. I always enjoy it. And until I see you all again, please, please, please take care. I should say before I go, next week is conference week and I will be back home in sunny old Scotland. So I don't know what we're going to do with the show next week, but we'll come up with some techies working on something. Until I see you all again, please, please take care. Bye now.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.